Hello, everyone. Thank you. Oh, nice. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to CPW. Some of you I know, some of you I maybe don't know. So thank you for joining us if you haven't already been here before at our new home here in Kingston. You're here on Thursday night where we join to listen to a local or visiting artist. Give us a little bit of a deep dive or behind the curtains look at their work and career. So we're very excited for you to be here. Huh? What? Oh. Thankfully, we have a generous support from Arnold and Augusta Newman, so we're able to make these free each week to you and to everyone else, and provide coffee as well. So help yourself. Quick housekeeping: the restroom is on the second floor. You can get there either this way, or the black door in the middle of the hallway, or by the elevator in the back. So help yourself if you need to. A couple announcements before I turn it over. Today we announced some of our winter workshops, so if that's something you're looking forward to, some of the things you might have missed this summer or some new classes or new workshops, please consider. It's a great holiday gift to either someone you love or to yourself. If you have any questions about any of those, let me know. I'm here. Another announcement that hasn't been made it to our website yet, but is very exciting, is we're going to be joined by Raheem Fortune and scholar Nicole Fleetwood, who curated this exhibition you're sitting in right now. Raheem's work is in the next gallery. They're going to be in conversation together here on Sunday, November 16th from 3 to 5 p.m. So we're very excited to have them here to talk about their work and the conversation they've been having for the past couple of years. And that's all I have for now. I will turn it over. We have obviously Joan Lyons. We're very excited to be joining us tonight, but we'll be joined first by Jessica Chapp, who's going to introduce Joan in a much more beautiful way than I was going to. So, Jess, you want to come up? And are you able to put it up for her?
Okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. This is a very special occasion. We're here to celebrate an extraordinary artist, bookmaker, and founding director of the Visual Studies Workshop Press, Joan Lyons. And I'm here because Joan was my father's mentor in the 1970s at VSW, and she's become my friend. That moment in time has become a great point of connection and curiosity in my own work. Whenever I mention the Visual Studies Workshop to someone who knew it in the 1970s or 80s, their faces light up, as if speaking about a hidden gem. Growing up, I often heard about VSW. It felt deeply important and a mysterious and inspiring part of my father's past. Though I never got to hear the stories from him, he passed away when I was 8 years old. I didn't begin to understand what this place meant to him until 2018, when I connected with Keith Smith, another of my father's mentors from VSW and a renowned book artist and my father's close friend. This is the only image I have of the two of them together, besides this photo collage Keith gave me. I asked if he had memories of my dad, and he sent me a long stream of consciousness email full of vivid, specific moments from their time together. We began corresponding in 2019. I visited Rochester. It happened to be the 50th anniversary of VSW's founding. During that trip, I met Keith, I met Joan, and several other of my father's friends. When I entered the VSW archive, known as the Trace Archive, I was handed boxes of my dad's work from his 5 years at the workshop that our family did not know existed. Since then, I've been building a digital archive of his work during that time and have been reconnecting with his peers while making my own work inspired by his time there. This ongoing project is called Synchronicities, titled after my father's senior thesis. And throughout it, I've experienced many moments that feel, well, synchronistic. For example, In 1978, my dad helped move the entire workshop from a small building on Elton Street to Prince Street. Decades later, I found myself at VSW in the building my father studied and worked in. During the final week before they moved from Prince Street to King Street, I wandered the building alone for hours among hundreds of boxes, taking photographs. At one point, out of curiosity and feeling a little aimless, I opened one box. The first image I pulled out was from the 30th reunion in 2000. Looking closer, I realized that I was in the photo at 6 years old, holding up that piece of paper I painted in with yellow. I had no idea I had left a trace in the archive. As I continue on this pursuit, the synchronicities continue to grow. In June, I was awarded a VSW research residency where I began researching the broader history of the institution and realized how deeply it shaped the field of photography. I believe the Visual Studies Workshop, like Black Mountain College and Bauhaus, should be recognized as central to the history of photography in all art history classes. In the 1950s and 60s, there was virtually no art market for photography. Photography mostly was used for commercial purposes. Personal work was done predominantly on the side. When researchers dig into the history of the American photo boom of the 1960s and 70s.
Jessica, can you speak in the mic?
Oh, you can't hear that?
That's better.
Ah, okay. When researchers dig into the history, okay. Hello? Okay. When researchers dig into the history of the American photo boom of the 1960s and 70s, they inevitably find that all roads lead back to Nathan Lyons. This was said by Jessica McDonald, a curator of photography at the Harry Ransom Center. Nathan Lyons, Joan Lyons' late husband, was one of the first curators to bring photography into the art world alongside John Sarkowski at MoMA. After leaving the George Eastman Museum in 1969, Nathan founded the Visual Studies Workshop, an MFA program that trained artists to think critically about photography through publishing, curation, and play. That's Joan. One of the main lessons that rubbed off on Nathan's students and his own work was the importance of sequencing images. My father, after his 5-year stint at the Visual Studies Workshop, moved to Los Angeles and briefly worked at a small press before pivoting to screenwriting. He realized that his VSW expertise in sequencing images could be directly transferred to screenwriting. He taught screenwriting at UCLA by having a student storyboard using cameras as he had done at VSW. He wrote a letter to Nathan Lyons describing the impact of this. The secret to writing a good screenplay depends on your ability to sequence images. Anyone who writes screenplays is lucky enough to have a thorough education in image sequencing goes immediately to the head of the class. I see that more clearly every day. If you look at VSW's alumni, you'll see the impact. Many became curators, photo editors, educators, and artists who shaped the field of photography in profound ways. VSW was more than a school or a press. It was a community, an incubator for experimentation, and at its heart was Joan Lyons. Joan's own work spans an incredible range of media: silver gelatin prints, artist books, archaic processes, pinhole photography, offset lithography, xeroxography, screen printing, photo quilting, and computer-based work. Since 1972, she has published over 30 editions of artist books and her name and several print portfolios, and her work is held in major collections, including the George Eastman Museum, MoMA, and the Harry Ransom Center. In 2023, the Memorial Art Gallery in Rochester mounted a major retrospective of her work. And earlier this year, she was named the Honored Educator by the Society for Photographic Education, a recognition that could not be more well-deserved. As the founding director of the Visual Studies Workshop Press from 1972 to 2004, Joan oversaw more than 450 titles. She also taught the MFA program and coordinated countless artist residencies and programs, always championing new voices and pushing the boundaries of what art can be. To say that Joan has shaped the landscape of media arts and book arts would be an understatement. Her vision, teaching, and publishing have paved the way for generations of artists, myself included. It's my honor to introduce Joan Lyons.
Well, thank you, Jessica. I'm really delighted to be here. Yeah. Okay. I'm really delighted to be in this new building. Visual Studies Workshop has also recently moved. And so congratulations to us both for surviving and evolving these how many years ago. I'd like to talk just a little bit about the artist spaces movement in the 1970s. The change that was taking place in the art world as artists found new means of production and distribution of their work. So Visual Studies Workshop was founded in 1968 or 69, depending on how you're counting. And I believe that CPW was 1977. And the early 70s and the 60s were a time of political upheaval, not unrelated to what we're experiencing now. Nixon was president, the Vietnam War was going on, and the draft radicalized a lot of young people. There was draft card burning, there were demonstrations and riots in the streets. The young people were rallying against any seat of power, most particularly universities. And they were finding this, I think, this impetus out of the civil rights movement of the 60s, because before that, there hadn't really been mass dissent in the country, probably since the 1930s. This seems to be cyclical. And also the art world was undergoing radical change. Museums and galleries were not serving many artists. They just weren't working for most of us. So artists began to take over the means of representing and disseminating their own work. Now, along with this came the rise of artist spaces. And this was boosted by government funding. NISCA started in the early 1960s, and NYFA launched New York Foundation of the Arts in 1971 to get funding directly to artists. NEA began in 1965, and Republicans began trying to abolish it in the 1980s and have finally succeeded, along with a few other things. So at this time, there was a vast change in technology, and maybe compared to the technological changes that are occurring now, it didn't seem like much. But suddenly, instead of the mimeograph machine, which was the most accessible tool previously for disseminating self-published work, there was this miraculous new copy machine. First laser printers, and copiers of all kinds. The first camcorder and videotape. The camcorder was the first portable video camera. It weighed 60 pounds or so, nevertheless. It was better than what existed previously. There were video artists, and there were happenings and performance art and installation art. And the artist book movement emerged. At the time, we naively touted inexpensive multiples that everybody was going to want. So, so that just sets the tone a little bit for the beginnings of institutions like this. And the fact that they had existed and continue to exist, I think, is pretty miraculous. What have I here? So I've never been a traditional photographer, having arrived, thank you, through painting, printmaking, and books. To me, photography is different from other visual media in that a photograph implies a real concrete phenomenon. I play with this idea while pushing away from the photographic reality of the snapshot or the documentary tradition. I also often become interested in recording what I cannot see, or at least, those things that elude my everyday vision. A lot of the work I do is born directly from the process I use. So the process and the idea have to come together in some way. And so I often found I had to reinvent the means to make the work I wanted to make. So since we're talking about the 60s and 70s, I thought I'd start with some very early work. I think this might have been one of the very first photographic pieces I did. It's 1969. And also, I think it was the first overtly feminist piece. I think we were channeling a bit of anger and a bit of tongue-in-cheekiness about being women in this time and space. And I'd like to say that I've made artist books for almost as long as I've made images. So the practice of combining images into narratives or otherwise sequencing them has become a long time project. Working in series and in books gradually led to gridded wall pieces that were, of course, to me, like pages in books. I enjoy playing, anyhow, I won't go there too much. Okay, so for this particular talk, I've selected just a group of images that don't rely on a single image, but rely on a group of images in a book or gridded wall pieces. And I realize this is a long program, and I'd really like to leave time for questions, so I will try and be brief in this. This piece is Prom, and it's from the 70s. And again, this relies on process. So this was way before computers. And the bit of play here is the observation that in order to reproduce a photograph in the old days, you had to make a halftone, which was a laborious process made where tonal ranges were translated into dots. And I noticed that fabric, which I liked and had worked with extensively, had its own screen. It had lines and a mesh. So I photographed this, 3 or 4 times because you needed different negatives to print offset. Anyhow, without the use of a screen. This also was the beginning of, to me, what seemed like a very radical and sort of courageous act that I was afraid to make. Making a piece, whoops, no, I'm going the wrong way here. Making a piece that was very feminist and pastel and sentimental. These were really no-nos in my art education. In 1972, like almost as soon as the workshop started, I think one of the first things we had was a press. And since I was the only person around who had any printing background, it became my responsibility. As soon as we had a press, artists began to appear and want to make books. This was before anyone was calling these things artist books. But that field was developing because, again, it was a medium that was totally within your control. So this is a series of little books from mid-70s, and it's called Perspectives. The images I think I found in old lantern slides, 19th century lantern slides, and I was kind of reconstructing the feeling and perspective of a landscape through this one image book. Another little game, again, trying to find a way of making the means of something's making visible. This entire book was made from 2 printing plates by feeding the paper through one time with one color and another time with another color. So that 3 or 4 plates made 50 or 60 different images. It's called Sunspots. The gynecologist was more, a little more complicated. I was doing a great deal of research about women's medicine at the time, which was largely controlled by men. And after doing a year or two's research in medical libraries, I realized that I wasn't going to write this scholarly book. I was going to do what I know how to do best. So the gynecologist combines a patient-doctor, a contemporary at the time, patient-doctor interview with these images, which are ancient representations of the uterus. That's what all these things were supposed to be. My mother's book, I think this was what, the 80s? I don't have the dates here.
Says 93.
93, that late? Okay.
93, yeah.
93. Okay. So this book had 2, it was stapled on 2 sides. It had 2 openings because, your memories aren't linear. And I thought if I'm doing something that represents even this minimal family history, which was all the history there was in my family, we don't remember things sequentially. So the different openings in the book allowed a reader to mix through it in something other than a chronological line. This book, again, I thought was very personal, and I thought a long time before I did it. But then I realized that this history of my mother's immigrant family was pretty universal as well as particular. I always felt this about autobiography. I was never interested in telling, a personal story, but using references that were more universal. This is a much later book and more akin to work I'm doing now. And it's called Crossing. And by now you get the idea that I like to combine at least two kinds of ideas or two kinds of information in a piece, particularly in a book. So Crossing is a whole series of, images of water. In this case, in actuality, this is Lake Champlain, which is standing into the Atlantic Ocean. And then after many pages, it becomes evident that the arrival is Ellis Island. And it's again, the story of an immigration, a very specific immigration. And New York Walks. I don't think I have to say a whole lot about this, but I love shadows, and I think part of it is I live in Rochester, a place where there seldom are any. So walking in New York, I'm fascinated by the people sprawled on the sidewalk, moving along. So this book is simply shadows. And the last book, a series of books I did, which play with an idea of landscape and the idea, I really feel that visual books, particularly artist books, can be, they're a medium that stand somewhere between the still image and the moving image. And this book plays with that idea, and it's based on a number of premises. This is one field which I photographed kind of in a circular fashion from early morning until sunset. And also I was using a rectangular format camera, but it's printed on square pages. So I just allowed the images to flow over the page and stop where they stopped, and the next one would pick up. So the flow of this book is not, an image to a page. And this was one of Four Seasons books. And I think that's the end of the books. And I'm going to show a few wall pieces because, I'm concentrating today on this idea of the grid, the idea of, multiple images and multiple kinds of information to convey an idea. This again is a kind of autobiographical piece. I've lived in the same house for more years than I can even imagine. And I decided I wanted to document the trees that had grown up around me. So these are some trees around the house. And, there are multiple kinds of information. I took a picture of the tree, and then I hung the picture of the tree on the tree for a period of time, a season maybe, and retrieved it. And then added to that, some botanical information, etc. This is the Women's Peace Encampment. In 1982, a Women's Peace Encampment was formed near Seneca Falls, New York, which was the site of the first Women's Rights Convention in 1848. And this gathering, this encampment, was meant to monitor the presence of nuclear arms at the adjacent Seneca Army Depot. The Army, of course, denied that it was storing nuclear weapons there. And of course, it turned out that, yes, they were. The townspeople were furious, not with the Army for storing nuclear weapons in their backyard, but for the women disturbing their lives with this annoying encampment and protest marches. And this piece was made to counter the predictably negative images of protesting women that appeared in the local press. And what I chose to do was a series of portraits of individual women, because I do consider these portraits. So, you know, there's the idea of women standing their ground. So this is done with a diazo process. So the footprint is literally an imprint. And then what was added to that was a little snapshot of the woman and a little bit of writing in her hands about why she was there and what this was about. And the enlarged contact sheets on the side were, you know, documents of the event. And this is the most overtly propaganda piece, I guess, that, you know, that I've done. And I chose to hang it in a very public place, in a department store downtown. We had those things at the time. This is called Some Trees Around the no, whatever am I? Notes from the Backyard. So okay, so the means I always have used materials. I love free materials, old outdated stuff that happens to be hanging around. So this was a box of 12 by 18 material that belonged to an obsolete machine. And what it was gelatin silver direct positive paper, a very high contrast because it was intended only to reproduce type. So I exposed that these images were made with this direct positive paper in a pinhole camera. And I've often used gardens in my work as a metaphor for personal and a privately constructed space. And the etymology of garden is from guard, which is, you know, to watch and to protect. And in this instance, this private space is being invaded and intruded upon by the violent political events from the world outside. In this case, it was a series of wars in Latin America. And I think that the high contrast paper used for the prints has a hard contrasty tonal range that I felt appropriate to this subject matter. Actually, I made this at the Women's Studio Workshop. It's the only paper piece I ever made. I always wanted an excuse to make paper. So this is called Collected Works. And what I did was shred and pulp up a series, just a bunch of work from the last 20 years that I wanted to discard. And since most of my work is on rag paper, it worked out pretty well. So I shredded this paper and recast it, and it's called Collected Works. And most of these gridded pieces I've been showing you are approximately 12 feet by whatever, because that was the biggest wall in my studio. Makes sense, right? Okay. This is called representations. And, I feel that art making grows out of its own accumulated history, as well as a particular moment in time. As artists, we're always looking at the past, looking at other work, really having a dialogue and a conversation with that. And as I visited museums more and more, I started thinking about, fragments, the way we look at things. How does your eye, pass from a detail in one piece to a detail in another? What are you actually seeing, especially in poorly lit museums in Europe and here? So this installation grows out of a long-time concern with visual narrative and sequential imaging. And this is photographed on film, in a handheld camera with available light in ill-lit places. And I was particularly interested in the point of view of the viewer, the artifacts, the way the light raked the images, the ripples in the canvas. The images were unbelievably consistent, because in the Western world, we really have, one source, which is the Christian myth. And I realized that those images of saints and martyrs, the representations of men and women, this Christian mimetic tradition that goes back, to the beginnings of Christianity, gets repeated and repeated in art making as time goes on. So there were 3 panels. There were about 90 images, and this was shown in a rather small space, maybe a quarter this size, with 3 wall-to-ceiling grids. And the idea is this particular panel is more contemporary representation of the theme. And this was very much, about the connections between images and the persistence of archetypes in our culture. I felt that, these kind of images really come from, the agonies of the saints in Renaissance painting. And, here we have, fashion magazines in the same tradition, or, the martyred saint and the Situs figure, or. Okay, this is the very last one, and this is a very recent piece, and it's called Nathan's Darkroom. And these photograms of the paraphernalia of a darkroom were made with 40-year-old photographic paper, which I felt was fitting because it was about a 40-year-old darkroom. And I liked reducing the photographic process to its absolute minimum. That seemed an appropriate way to document the shadowy objects and gadgets of an old technology. And another little game that I set for myself was to use every sheet of paper, of this outdated paper. And if it didn't image, I helped it along with, some chemistry or handwork. So, this to me is, well, maybe, I mean, the most minimal expression of photography I could figure out at the moment, and that kind of appeals to me. So, thank you. Questions? Yeah, please.
Joan, the 3 or 4 colored books that you showed, were they also ever exhibited to the size of the other projects that you worked on that were like 8 feet? Did they
3 feet. No, they're books. They're little. They're just
You
books.
never showed them
No,
larger?
no. They're books. The books are very minimal. They're small.
Because some of the larger pieces too lend themselves to looking like they were books as well. Hard to
Right.
tell.
Well, it's hard to see, and in slides they're all kind of reduced to similar things. But the interest is in this idea of multiple images, building and relying on each other and changing and evolving in time in a book, right? Or space in a grid. I used to paint, but I made big paintings in the 60s, and I soon stopped that because it seemed kind of silly what I was going to do with these things. So past that, if I feel like working larger, I just do something that can fit in a box, I guess.
I'm curious to hear how the material considerations and the spiritual considerations of your practice intersect in dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Well, very strongly, because I feel, every time I start to do a piece, it kind of needs a new means, and like some of these things come together very, very quickly. This piece I did in a couple of days. The something like representations, the historical prints went on for 10 years. Some of the books are very quick. Some involve a long evolution. So it's really important to me that the physicality of the piece, relates to what I wanted to say. And less so now. I do more digital work, but even there, it sometimes takes a very long time before I figure out what it is I want to do, or what I'm doing. I mean, I do it. I don't really pre-plan a lot. Yeah.
How do you know when you're done?
Well, that's what I like about books. You print it, you bind it, it's done. Some of the other kinds of pieces take a long time and go on. It's funny because I seldom know, when I do the more extended pieces, I seldom know, what they're going to be or where they're going to wind up. For instance, the backyard piece. I mean, I was making those images out of, some kind of frustration with what was going on in the world. And it wasn't until I was fairly well into that, or into the representation piece, that it developed, a form.
What's your sense of the cultural impact of the artist book movement? Because
Yeah.
as you suggested, it started out as an idea of multiples and low-cost production and so forth, and it's had an interesting trajectory.
Right.
Now it seems like everybody's making
Yeah,
books,
right.
photography books. I don't know whether
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, Lucy Lapod for that, you know, idea of the democratic multiple. I don't know, you know, early on, and we weren't even calling them artist books when we started making them, you know, it seemed like a kind of nice idea. You made this little thing, and I was lucky enough to have an offset press and develop the press. And that also was kind of accidental. We had a little press, and as soon as we had a little press, artists started appearing and saying, I want to make a book. So we got a little better press, and that evolved. But, you know, I don't know. I don't really understand it now when printed matter has a fair and, you know, 1 million people line up outside to look at these things, and there are 300 or 400 producers. And all I can say is, you know, seeing that the book is dead, it's pretty remarkable.
But that's what I mean. It seems like through printed matter, the artist's book has now become something much bigger than Lucy and you. And
Oh, of course.
Imagine.
Yeah, it's everything now. And then there's the other ends of it, you know, the precious individual object. But I think that's because, you know, the means of production have shifted. You know, if you wanted to make a book, you know, in Eastern Europe, you copied it out by hand and passed it around to your friends. In the 50s, you used a mimeograph machine. And then, you know, copiers came, and people could make little editions, you know, and pass them around. And now, you know, you have this incredible printer upstairs, and anybody can make a book. And if you don't have a printer, you send it off to Blurb or MagCloud, and you have a book. So, I mean, when you think of it, this is pretty remarkable that, I mean, you know, distributing them is something else, and how much of an impact they have out there. But I think, you know, I don't know. Do you think it has something to do with the ease of production? You know, when we made offset books, the process was so laborious. You had to make the negatives and impose them on a sheet and make plates and print one color at a time. It was a very laborious process, and we had the press because that was the only means at the time that you could make multiple books. Copy machines were still, you know, pretty crude. You know, but now, you know, the accessibility, I don't know, you know, in all, maybe this whole idea of accessibility is the issue of this time. You know, how, you know, accessible it is to post something on a computer and distribute it so widely. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying that, because you started out talking about shifts in technology,
Mm-hmm.
and we're right
Right.
in the middle of the
Right.
big one.
Well,
It's like
yeah.
artist bookmaking of all kinds, so it's tied up in that
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think there are periods of time. I think the 70s was a time where there really was an explosion of technology. But if you look at it, I mean, compared to what's going on now, it was really minimal. I mean, I can't even imagine what the current changes in technology are going to, you know, bring to artists or to the world for that matter.
How do you show your images on the wall?
What do you mean?
Book images?
No, they're just little books.
No, I know, but do you ever, these things they translate to the wall.
You know, there's only one book, that gynecologist book. I did a kind of wall version of it. Wasn't exactly that, but I used those images and made, you know, a big triptych. And I'm not sure it was that successful. I don't really want to do a lot of reading when I look at work. So, you know, so I particularly don't do an installation that has a great deal of text and needs a lot of reading. I'll do a book if I want to put a lot of text in it. And I guess some of them would translate to the wall, but I haven't
The
really.
form is a book.
Yeah, the
not
books are books.
Images that went into a book.
Well, okay, now that's an interesting distinction because I think that's in part what makes an artist's book. I mean, I don't have a bunch of images and then put them into a book. I generally make the images for the book because I have a book idea,
I understand.
and then I make the images for that.
I think it's hard to put images, when you think of it as a book,
Mhm.
even if it's without text. It's hard because of the sequencing and the scale and the relationship between the pages. It's very hard to think about how to do that on the wall, even if you didn't have text.
Well, in the 1960s, up to the 1960s, most photographic books were kind of portfolios between covers, right? And there were exceptions, of course, just a few exceptions, which is why, Robert Frank's book, The Americans, made such a big splash because people realized, oh, there's something intentional here. He didn't randomly put a bunch of pictures in a book as a portfolio between covers. And, the truth is that Robert Frank had a lot of experience making books. He made dozens and dozens of books and book dummies for his friends and all kinds of things, and was really, one of the first photographers. Well, there were, of course, some before, but thinking about this as a particular problem, But I think in these artist books, they go even further. That, like someone like Francois Deschamps, who's sitting there, very deliberately makes books. He doesn't take a bunch of images he has and put them into a sequence. And it's just different way, and it's great to be able to spread this idea over 50 or 70 pages if that's what it needs.
One thing that's very hard for artists who are self-publishing their books now is, well, it was back in the 70s too, not too many people self-published. You didn't self-publish, you had maybe a BSW did, but, usually it's very, people were working in black and white. And with negatives, it was very hard to get the right printing, the right duotone or tritone printing to do what the aesthetic was at the time. But the image was very important, and I find that's not something that's happening now.
What isn't?
Image is not as important.
Oh,
as
I
the
don't know.
Concept is.
Well, I mean, there are many different kinds of books. You can.
Sorry?
There are many different kinds of books. I mean, a monograph of a photographer's work is something, different. But I think that if you look at, contemporary photo books, I mean, they're really quite remarkable. People are doing extraordinary things. And I think, because of artist books and because of technology, the availability of the way you can put things together in a computer, the ease of printing, that photo books have, I don't know what is an artist book or a photo book anymore. People are making beautiful books that are, very complex and really, are narratives rather than, images stuck between covers.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
No, I'm not done. I
Oh,
have a question.
oh.
I was just saying thank you. This has been amazing. We're so excited to have you here. I have a question. Something you said that just kind of like blew my mind that I can't believe I had never heard anyone say, or maybe I just didn't hear it before, was the idea that like the book is sort of between a still image and a film.
Mhm, yeah.
I like just had that. I was like, yeah, completely.
Right.
And I guess I want to hear a little bit more about, like, I know your background was in printmaking, and then you kind of came to offset, and like, what is filmmaking something that you had ever considered, or did you find that like that book format was like the perfect middle ground for you as someone who was making single images or prints, doing different types of print?
Well, I think I had so much technology in my life, more than I ever, wanted or expected, or, because I was doing commercial offset printing basically also. So for me, I said, okay, I'm going to stop at the book. Maybe if I was 20 years younger, I would have moved into video or film or computer games or something else. But for me, this is about as much movement as I personally will deal with in my work. But it's true. I mean, it is. I mean, a lot of the way I approach books is really, like a little, some of them are deliberate, like that walk book or the landscape books that I've been doing. The seasonal books are definitely, directly cinematic in a way. They're like a series of time time stills.
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, you see it with like flip books, or people have like,
Yeah.
it really looks like a film, but I love the way it was very just brilliant way it's sort of, yeah, kind of making it feel very film-like.
Okay. Yep.
It's not a question.
Oh,
I just want to acknowledge the generosity that you've had towards the artist book community, that you've facilitated the making of so many books, and my own work has been so impacted by your generosity and support. And that's a huge legacy.
well, thank you. But what a pleasure and a privilege it is to have, all of these people come, into your space and be there for a month or so and, and make books. I mean, for an artist to have like a day job like that is really a dream. And, it was a lot of work, but it was really quite wonderful. I loved about 99% of them.
And raising kids at the same time.
Well, yeah, but there's that.
There was,
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you think, the work you were doing earlier, 70s, 80s, 90s before digital,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more work to make something.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just curious if you feel like that helped you, like, refine and develop what you were doing versus now where it's so easy.
I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's easy. For instance, I worked for like 10 years collecting landscape images to figure out what I wanted to do with them. And then finally, figured out that, it's a piece I haven't shown, that I kind of wanted to bring two kinds of information together. So, that piece had like digital roots, but it took, 10 years to become something that interested me. So I don't think that just because you work digitally and you can push the button and print it quickly that it makes it any easier. A lot of the later books, I showed a few books that are digital. Maybe the technical process has fewer steps, you know.
You talked about how you like to put two
Yeah.
different things in conversation with each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious what the relationship between those two things tends to be, if they're very contrasting or if they're kind of fluid. Maybe it's just in each time, but I'd love to hear more about that process.
Yeah. Well, it could be, an image or a text. It could be, two different kinds of media. I really get, I like piecing. I did a lot of sewing, and I've done quilting, and I build images probably still, more like a painter or a printmaker than a photographer. So, and it is this idea of piecework, which is, maybe a very, a women's work in a sense that interests me. I don't. I have to think about that a little more. Yeah.
Can you talk about the design activity?
I can't hear you. I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Can you talk about how it is kind of with the opening yourself to dynamic artists living together?
Yeah. Well, it's pretty interesting because our work couldn't be more different. Nathan, and strangely enough, we really, I think, had a pretty deep understanding of each other's work, but we didn't really talk about it. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about it. I might pass by when he was sequencing something and say, and pick up something and put it over there. Or he might, or might not agree with it. And he might pass by, and look at what I was doing. So in that sense, we had great respect for each other's work, and it was wonderful to have another, your partner working and understanding what you did. And it was sort of the same thing at Visual Studies Workshop. We worked together there for years, but we really, in some sense worked together, in some sense didn't. He had his responsibilities and I had mine. I didn't get involved in the administration of the workshop. Nathan was really miraculously able to be a very strong director and organize an institution, but give complete autonomy to the areas within it. So whoever was, the curator at the gallery at the moment really decided what was going to be shown. And if they could raise the money to do it, fine. After Image, the publication often was a lot more radical than the rest of the workshop. That was fine. So the print shop, the video area, these areas were pretty much independent. And a lot of times, the areas were run by graduate students or by interns who had just graduated. And they had pretty free rein in responsibility to develop their program areas. And I think that's something about the workshop that I think was important. And sometimes disruptive, but usually kind of wonderful.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you so much.